My name is Christopher Booker. I work at the Midnight Mission. I'm the health and wellness coordinator here. I started in March a year ago. It's kind of a dream job for me. Let's see what it was like. I grew up in Long Beach in, I would say, a lower middle class family. My father was a college graduate. Both my parents worked. Both my parents were in the home. I did fairly well in school. I was the youngest of 4 boys. So I was the only child of both of my parents, and I was 10 years younger than the next sibling. And I think that from an early age, I identified as an outsider because my first experience of social grouping was my brothers being able to do things that I couldn't be a part of, and also my brothers coming from a different family composition. And so I kind of identified with being outside of that social group. And I think that that pattern kind of stuck with me through all of my formative years. In elementary school, my parents both together, I think, made a pretty decent income for the situation that we were in, and they were able to put me into a private school in elementary. And I think I was one of a few Black children, and I think that I developed an outsider relationship with that population. So because of the education that I got in my younger years, my elementary years, once I transitioned into public school, I did well and ended up in magnet and honors classes. And I was the minority racially in those classes oftentimes. And I think that I developed kind of an outsider relationship with my social group there as well. And to just kind of stack that, my family relocated to a new state where I got to be an outsider there. And then when I came back to Long Beach, I had no longer had the same groups of friends or relationships and I was an outsider there. So for whatever reason, the story of outsider developed for me as a way that I identified. And I think that stuck with me until I found a way to kind of group in with social peers through drug use. So in high school, I started my journey with drugs, just some marijuana and drug sales and that kind of stuff. And for one of the first times, I was kind of the center of a friend group. I had gravitas and I belonged, right? A lot of people in the recovery community would say I had arrived, and I had found my identity as a drug user, and I was quite good at that. So I continued that pattern, even throughout college. I did get into college, but I would probably, because of my drug use, I made a lot of choices where I didn't end up finishing. I had a lot of opportunities that were afforded me to sing classically for a scholarship there. I still can't really figure out why I turned down just a lot of opportunities for good things where I think got kind of stained by choices and formed how I thought about myself. And so I went down a pathway of kind of identifying as a drug user and trying to be really good at that, using copious amounts to say that I was the best drug user amongst other drug users. And I did that for a long time. I think it was probably after a high school sweetheart breakup. I found meth for the first time. Maybe I was 19. Found myself in an addiction cycle with that for about 2 years. Luckily, I had parents who were willing to afford me while I went to college. And so I was kind of enabled to continue that behavior for a while until I was introduced to opioids during kind of the start of the opioid catastrophe in this country. And I was looped in with that. So I found OxyContin and started using all of the medical forms of opiates until that became too expensive. And then I found myself as a heroin addict, and that was really when I caught my stride. I used heroin intravenously for, 10 years off and on. And during those years of addiction, I lied to everyone. I was late for everything. I stole from anyone, I put my family and the people closest to me through a lot of pain. I didn't even kind of relate with guilt or shame around my behavior until later in my life, because at the time I was so absorbed in just kind of getting my high, getting attention. I was really blind to the pain that I caused. So I had jobs and I was able to generate money, and I had romantic relationships and I had children, and I was able to kind of operate in this world. And so I guess maybe for those reasons, I didn't identify as an addict with like a problem. I was just kind of like in the midst of it, doing my thing, barely hanging on for years. And it wasn't until my most recent foray into methamphetamines. I don't know how I found my way back there, but I just found a group of people who really like to party hard, and whatever drug was being used just wasn't enough until I kind of like trailed off from this drug to that drug to that drug, and then back into meth. And then once I got in there, it really hooked. My mental state deteriorated, and I became the worst, absolute worst version of myself that I could possibly imagine, until I just kind of had a breakdown and found myself fleeing my life completely, leaving everything that I owned, everybody that I was around, everybody that I was responsible for, everything behind me. And so I lived that lifestyle for a few months until I recognized my decisions were leading rapidly towards death. I reached out to a family member, and they gave me enough chance to heal from the abuse that I was putting my body and mind through, long enough to make a decision on what I was going to do next with my life. And in that moment, I started to seek out shelters. A contact of mine told me that if I was going to come to downtown Los Angeles, that the Midnight Mission was probably the best option for me. So I called the mission. I believe that the first person that I talked to was Matt Scharf. He told me over the phone that I was going to have to be willing to enter into a recovery program, and I was whatever you need me to do, because there were no other options at this point. And so I came down. The first face that I saw was Thomas Stark. I remember, and I'd recounted this story to someone else, is that I felt safe. Like Thomas Stark, I could see on his face there was like a, we're gonna take care of you. Like I felt like it was gonna be okay for like at least that moment, enough to trust him to go into the courtyard, give up some of my possessions, and willingly, enroll myself in a program. And then I was here. And although I kind of tried to stay under the radar and tried not to do my recovery thing for a while, I did end up choosing to admit to myself that I was powerless over drugs and alcohol, and that I needed to take some steps to recover my life and my soul and my spirit. And so I started that journey through the recovery program, the Healthy Living program here at the Mission. And in the meantime, I took it upon myself also to rehabilitate my body through the gym and the weight room facility here at the Mission. In that, I found kind of a passion, and it just so happened our beloved Coach Val, who had been administrating the health and wellness program before, for her to move on. And she made that decision, and so there was kind of a lapse. And the weight room was closed and the gym was closed, and I was in a panic. And although had my recovery, my anchor to like kind of relieve stress or maybe feel like I had some control over myself was fitness. And so I took it upon myself to kind of start cleaning the gym and being like a voluntary steward of the health and wellness program, just so I could get access. It was 100% for me. And in that, I started learning that this could be my version of service. I could do this not just for me, but I could do it for everybody, because when it was open, everybody got to use it. And as long as I did it responsibly in a way that made, the leadership here at the Mission feel safe, then it would remain open. And you could see that the energy around the building is just different when that room is open. That turned into the leadership here trusting me with an actual role under the employment of the Mission. And so I got that job. Eventually, I was housed due to Eli being amazing at what he does and the Mission being amazing at what they do. Now I work for the Mission as the Health and Wellness Coordinator, and I am also the president of the 1201 Club, which is our Healthy Living Program Alumni Association, which are responsibilities that I kind of never thought when I got here that I would have. It's mid-August, so I am a little more than 2 years sober as of August 10th. I have my own place And I have a job that I love where I get to not only be in fitness, but be a part of other people's transformation into caring about their health and their well-being. And I get to experience people like overcoming their own limitations on a daily basis. And you get to see like the joy in people's faces. And that's kind of like irreplaceable as an experience. I get to be a part of the mission here to help people recover. And I get to be an example to my brothers who are experiencing their own recovery and fighting for their lives, to let them know, hey, I've been in those bunks, in those beds. I've experienced the same stresses that you've experienced. I still experience the same stresses that you experience. I'm not perfect and it's not perfect, but like I'm sober today. And there are smiles and joys to be had, and we're going to continue to fight this thing together. And I think that's a tremendous blessing. So I get to have my service right here. I get to stay connected to recovery on a daily basis and also get the fruits of my life. And I'm recovering relationships with the people who were closest to me. I'm trying, and definitely in contrast to the life that I was living, I am living a greater life than I was, with a greater purpose than I was, in a way that I think can make them at least a little bit proud. I would say transformation is now. Like, you don't have time to play around with your life. Life is now and death is whenever. Like, you can't predict that, right? So get to the good stuff now. The people here whose job it is to help you, allow people to help you, accept the help, accept the information. So just kind of like trust the process and do the thing.